The raven's flight, the lady's fate. The wind howled over the flatlands of Eldoria, a cursed stretch of land where magic and desolation wove together in an unholy dance. A lone raven, its feathers inky black, its eyes reflecting the cold glint of starlight cut through the stormy sky, its wings pushing against the invisible currents of magic that whispered secrets even to the dead. It was not a natural raven, nor was it truly alive. It had been conjured with a single purpose, to deliver a message. It had no name, no past, no future beyond its mission. And yet, as it flew, it knew sorrow. It was sad for Fiona. It could see her in its mind's eye, her fate unfolding before it in snippets of things yet to be. The moment it delivered its message, the vision would become real. And so it flew with quiet despair, bearing the weight of its own fleeting existence and the fate of a woman who did not yet know how completely her life would change. Fiona Bramley sat in the parlor, her fingers curled into the rich fabric of her gown. Her mother stood at the window, gazing at the darkening horizon with the satisfaction of a woman whose plans had come to fruition. "He's not so bad, you know," her mother said airily, swirling her wine in her glass. "He'll treat you well enough." "He'll treat me like a prize mare," Fiona thought bitterly. "Admired for my lineage, bred for my worth, nothing more." She had no illusions about what this marriage meant. Her father had accepted the offer with such eagerness that it sickened her. The man she was to marry, Eldrick Vaughan, was a wealthy common mage, a man who thought his power and riches should grant him nobility. He did not love her. He did not even know her. All he cared about was the prestige of her name and the purity of her bloodline. It was the final insult in a life dictated by duty, by expectation, by chains wrapped in the silken trappings of privilege. The raven flew on. It saw her future as clearly as it saw the snow-dusted ridges of Eldoria beyond the flatlands. A wedding she did not want. A husband she did not love. A life she did not choose. And worst of all, the quiet, slow dying of herself. Not in body, but in spirit. The wind tore at the raven's wings, but it pressed on, for it had no choice. The magic that sustained it urged it forward, towards the grand estate where Lady Fiona Bramley awaited a future she would never have chosen. It saw her wedding day. She stood in an opulent gown of silver and sapphire, her expression carefully schooled into something resembling grace. The hall was filled with lords and ladies, all murmuring about the fine match, the wealth, the prestige. Eldrick Vaughan was a handsome man, well-dressed and charming to those who did not look too deeply. He took her hand in his with the confidence of a man who believed himself entitled to her. The raven's wings trembled. It did not wish to see more, but it must. Fiona's life blurred before its vision, a series of days and nights lost to obligations and expectations. She bore her husband's company with forced civility. She fulfilled the duties expected of a wife of nobility. She smiled when required, laughed when appropriate, and died a little more each day. The raven did not wish to deliver this fate to her, but it must. Fiona stood by the window as the storm rolled in. She had not spoken since the announcement. There had been no point. Outside, something dark sliced through the sky, fighting against the wind. It was a strange thing to pity a bird, but the sight of it stirred something in her. The raven was tired. So was she. It reached the estate, its magic tugging it down, until it alighted on the stone railing outside her window. Fiona turned as a sharp rap echoed through the glass. Her father glanced up from his seat. "Ah, that will be your message, my dear. Do be quick about it." Her hands trembled as she unlatched the window. The raven hopped forward, its glowing blue eyes locking onto hers. It did not speak. It had no words of its own, only the message. With a flick of its beak, It dropped the scroll onto her waiting palm. Fiona hesitated, staring at it, knowing that whatever was written there would seal her fate. The raven wished she would not read it. She broke the wax seal. The words swam before her eyes, but she already knew what they said. An official betrothal. A wedding date set. The end of what little freedom she had left. The raven watched as her fingers curled, crushing the parchment in her grip. It had delivered its message. Its purpose was complete. A strange weight settled in its chest as the magic sustaining it began to unravel. The storm wind pulled at its feathers, and it knew this was the end. It was fading, but before it disappeared, before it ceased to exist, it saw one last thing. Fiona, burning the letter. Her jaw clenched, her eyes dark with something not quite rage, not quite despair, but something new, something sharp and alive. And in that moment, the raven did not feel quite so sad. For perhaps Fiona's fate was not yet written after all. The last thing it saw before vanishing into the night was the flicker of flame in her eyes.